Hi there, River Richardson here with the Haven Earth Trade School. We're here at Haven Village in East Tennessee, and inside of our hemp podcast studio that we had Graham Durrant come over from the UK. Graham, if you don't know Graham already, he's been in the hempcrete space for about 13 years and is prolific in the hemp space in the UK with his company Hemp Lime Spray. And Graham's moving into a retirement phase, so we thought this was a great time to rob some of his knowledge from him before he goes off on his boat for the rest of time. So we built the podcast studio, which is super small. It's about 6 by 8, something like that, but big enough so a couple of people can sit in here and we can really leverage this building material. And we just wanted to take a little minute before Graham leaves to go over just what the experience was like for you, really. And you know, Graham hasn't been here since he was a wee lad.
Yeah.
And so, you know, kind of what's your impression of the hemp building space over here, you know, after you've seen it from a distance, but now you get to see it in person. And
so first of all, I'd like to say it's just been such fun. I've had the time of my life. It's been really good. And the group was fabulous. We had real engagement, and the night we did like a voluntary presentation that I gave, and people didn't have to turn out, but they all did, and so it all really worked, and we got this all up, which was rather good. We got to schedule. We kind of in the end we
did really well.
So it's been fascinating. The whole thing has been fascinating.
So what do you know, I mean, you're coming from an industry that's been established, but I know we talked about it, it's really not even an industry, right?
I think you could struggle to call the hempcrete an industry in the UK even. I know, you know, people, we've done more buildings than most, but it is such a niche market. We are tiny. What myself and people like me and Will Stanix have been doing is we've been paving the way for others, because we've sort of proven these buildings work. We've proven how we can do it efficiently and cost effectively, and so really I think that's what I've seen my role as being, in a way. You know, I've made my living doing it, and it's been great. I've moved, you know, travelled quite a lot with it, and met a whole bunch of interesting people. But it's not really, I often say to people, it's just me and some people I know chucking hempcrete into buildings is what it turns out to be. So, but I guess in the global scale, the UK is quite advanced, but it's just because, you know, it takes a lot to change the construction industry.
That's for sure. And you know, and I think somewhere like the UK, it is such an established system, and there is so much bureaucracy around getting permitting, and all these things that, you know, it's a credit to you, I guess, you know, like that you've been able to really push that forward, because that's kind of part of the battle in a way.
It is. A lot of the battle is with bureaucracy, and a lot of the air building research establishment that we have in the UK, which is the equivalent of your building code here, they're just not really with it. They're still using very outdated science in lots of cases, and that's kind of crazy. We know so much more than we did 40 years ago, but that hasn't actually changed the regulations so much. So it is an uphill struggle, but there are lots of good building inspectors on the ground that when you give them your reasoning, they'll kind of go, I didn't know that, and that's how you make headway. And if you get an architect that's really behind that process as well, that's when it really goes smoothly, because they're the ones that are designing. And there's not that many architects that know how to design with hempcrete, but the people, really, if the architect is open, then you can get to a point where you just work the wall build up to make it work. But so we're getting there. It is an uphill struggle.
And I think it's interesting that, you know, kind of, you know, I'm fairly new in the space and come from a architectural background and project management, And I'm learning, you know, a lot through the builds we're doing here at the village, and then you know, the reason we connected was because I was looking for more information that really wasn't out there.
No, it's not out
really
there,
hard to find information out there on best practices, and that was what we first started talking about. Was that's kind of missing part of this, was like, okay, you know, and then that's why we did this studio like we did. We brought hempcrete blocks in, which I know you're working with you're using the same blocks out in the UK, right?
Yeah, so I mean we've done all kinds of wall build-ups over the years, but now we pretty much stick with, on new build anyway, not renovation, we have to go with what we've got with renovation. But on new builds, we only do 3 wall build-ups really, which are if we sometimes we introduce block on the inside of the timber frame and then cast or spray to the outside. So you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting a dry block on the inside, and that's particularly helpful if you're working late in the year, because the dry block means you can carry on and get on with stuff on the inside of the building and just let the hempcrete dry to the outside. And then the other wall build up, if we're using siding or cladding as we call it in the UK, then the frame goes on the outside, and that's a straightforward wall build up with, you know, lime or clay plaster on the inside, hempcrete through the wall, between the studs and over the studs, and then some kind of layer, either a breathable membrane or clay slip or lime slip to shut the surface of the hempcrete down, then batten and counter batten, and then siding. That's another really simple wall build-up that works tremendously well. And then there's the simplest of all, which is simply lime or clay plaster on the inside, frame in the middle, and render on the outside, hempcrete encasing the frame. And those 3 methods are the quickest on-site methods to use. They're the easiest. They just really work. They're certainly the most cost-effective. Beyond doubt, they're the 3 most cost-effective ways. So what we've tried to do is simplify it.
Right.
You know, not make it more complicated,
right,
and give people 20 different wall build-ups to choose from, because that just doesn't really cut it. People get confused with all the choice. So we give them 3 choices. They're all really good. They work really well. You just can't beat them.
Right. Yeah, and it's good. You know, I come from it in a different way because I've come from generally high-end architectural design and high-end projects. You know, 5-star hotels and all of that. And so I'm kind of, you know, obviously I want the buildings to perform, but then there's a part of me that's like, aesthetic, you know, and that's what I really like about what you're bringing to the table, because from what I tell, your goal is to like get as much hempcrete out into the world as possible, as affordable as possible.
Yeah.
You know, and you are making beautiful projects. It's not that's not the case. But I think your focus has been on like, how can it be efficient as possible?
Yeah.
And how is it performing, right?
Yeah. So what I'd say is, I think you could say we're slap happy in how we do it, but we don't compromise on the quality of the building, because and to give you an example of that, I will shutter really roughly in places where it doesn't matter. So I won't spend a lot of time shuttering, because I know that as long as I've got more hempcrete in the wall than I need, I can just shave it back to exactly what I want. So for us, it is all about, you know, get that mix out, get it in the wall, you know, and move on, because it has to be economically viable. You know, if we could, I mean, in fact, when we first started doing hempcrete, a site pretty much lasted twice as long as it does now. And so we've just shaved all these bits off, and of course the client ends up with better value for money, which, you know, at the end of the day, that's how you survive or not in this industry, is you give people value for money, and if you don't give people value for money, you don't last, because or you'll have a series of disappointed clients behind you.
Right. And isn't that the you were telling me about the company that came to the UK and set up a big you know, there was going to be like the big hempcrete business out there, and they were going to, you know, just expand the industry, and like, what happened with them? That was 10 years ago or something?
No, it was longer than that. So
really?
Lime Technology was set up in the UK, and they did a lot of the hard work in the UK. It has to be said, all credit to them. They got it through building regs. They got it as an established medium, and I actually came in at the end of their of them being trading. But I think that what happened really was that they set themselves up as shopkeepers, and they were selling hemp and they were selling binder. But what they weren't doing is really controlling the installation process. And it is interesting how, you know, you've got a lime-based binder, hemp and water, but it's really interesting how many different ways people can find over the years to mess that up. And you wouldn't think that you could, but you absolutely can. And because with anything new, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
That makes it a bit trickier. And I think that really what to some extent there was the crash in 2008, and there were various other factors, but essentially, if you control the installation process and do that well, everything else is easy. You get a building that just will sit there. You know, obviously it's got to be designed properly, but if you design well, install well, the material just looks after itself. You know, and interestingly, there isn't much of a maintenance regime, because on a building with siding or cladding, you'll replace the cladding maybe 30, 40 years later, depending on what your local climate is. And with render, you know, you're looking at least 50 years, because if you keep the frame away from the stucco or render on the outside, so you're only going onto hempcrete. If you only go onto hempcrete, it's such a homogeneous surface and it matches so well with the lime that you won't get the cracking that you get if you're going over timber frames and stuff like that. So it just looks after itself. And I can actually remember the phone call years ago, the first phone call I had with somebody in the building trade who said, okay, so what I need you to do is I need you to write me out what's the long-term maintenance with hempcrete. And I can remember sitting there sort of wondering how on earth I can answer the question, because I was thinking, well, there must be some long-term maintenance because he's asked the question, so what can I tell him? And then I realised it's like, well, you might have to re-render in 50 to 100 years' time, and you might have to change the cladding. And apart from that, don't put paint on the inside that's not breathable. And apart from that, you know, you're good to go.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the beauty of it, right? It is calcifying in its ability to handle the moisture and regulate that moisture out.
Yeah.
Puts it in a category of building materials that is very different, I think, to the industry that we're in right now. Yeah. Which they really want the materials to break down. They don't want the materials to last forever. They're not designing things to last forever. Yeah. They want that planned obsolescence almost.
That is, it is, you know? I think it is it's built-in obsolescence. And of course it's fun. Most of what is controlled, you know, with the code and building regulations, the interested parties are the ones that manufacture those products. So that's why we see the same products on building sites now as we saw 30 years ago, even though we know way more about how buildings function now. And so I think that's a sort of a bit of the issue for me, is that, you know, we've got these good ways of measuring building performance, and yet we're still using quite archaic ways of measuring building performance. And we do know how to build a building that will last for an enormously long time. It's always difficult to put numbers on, but there's no reason why a hempcrete building shouldn't last an incredibly long time. It's difficult to see what would actually stop it being, if you see what I mean, because it's not going to burn down. If it's designed well, it's not going to rot. And moisture kills most buildings anyway. That's what it does for buildings in the end. But because it doesn't trap moisture, it's not going to be killed by moisture. So I think, the built-in obsolescence, well, in fact, let's face it, the built-in obsolescence that we have in every product, it needs to end. We can't.
It's a throwaway culture.
Yeah, we can't carry on like that. So, you know.
Well, I think you came to the place, America, which has become the epicenter of planned obsolescence in so many ways, and that culture spread around the world. But I think it's been really great having you here, because you bring that, I think, a sense of practicalness to the industry, and to people coming to the trainings. You shared a lot of really good information on the building science. And we gotta get Graham to the airport, so we gotta kind of close this up. But I think what my takeaway was, which I haven't been able to deliver in a workshop. I'm learning as well at the same time, and I haven't had a career in the hemp space. I have a career in architecture and construction, but bringing you in here, and then we're looking to bring Will in later. Like, you guys have been doing it, and you've really kind of experimental on the edge of the pushing the envelope with it. I think all the people who came to the training just really felt this sense that they got so much. And I think what we're doing here and why it's so good, I think, is that you're not just in some village hall or something giving a presentation abstract. We have hemp buildings, we have different projects in different phases with slightly different techniques being used, and we're improving, and I'm improving and learning more as I go along. But I feel like the people got this like immersion here.
I think that's what I enjoyed about it more than anything, is that we had, normally when I do training, it's either people come and just work with me, which is great, or I run a one-day thing, or maybe it's just a presentation even that I give, and all I can give is a bit of an overview. But I had 5-6 days, and the lunch times and the breakfast times and the evening times when we sort of just had more informal one-on-one conversations. And so and through all the presentations, I could really feed the whole story out, and it was really nice to get the whole story out rather than be limited to just I can only tell them
condense it in 2 hours or something.
And if I judge how well it was received by people, I would say the feedback I got was really good, and I got lots of hugs as everybody left. And I figure if you measure your impact on hugs, that's probably not the worst metric.
That's so good. Well, we're really grateful to have Graham here, and we're hoping to bring Graham out here next year when we've got other houses built, and I have the next hemp house we're going to be building with the rain screen cladding. I'm really excited about that, because plastering hemp houses is its own animal. And we're dealing with some things of the climate and the moisture here and all of that, and that's a whole nother ball game, right? It's like you've been doing it in the UK, but here's a whole nother climate. So super excited. I'm really grateful that you came out, Graham. We feel blessed, and you're so awesome.
Thank you.
And you're funny as well, so that makes it even better. So thanks, guys. You're gonna roll in here with us, and you look out the window and see our beautiful view. See you later.
Bye.